We're doing a video on the overall operation, setup, and safety of our MBO B18 paper folder. It comes with the straight folder main unit and the optional right angle attachment. But the first thing I want to cover on any of this is the safety and the safe operation of this machine. Of all the pieces of equipment that we have in this little print shop, my personal opinion, this is probably the most dangerous piece of equipment that we have, because this thing can grab you and not let go. It does have safety stops, it does have lockout, tag out. However, if you're not careful, this thing can hurt you and hurt you very badly. So we're going to cover safety first, as I had said. We're going to start here with safety stops. This machine does have 3 different safety emergency stops on it. One is located on the main panel. One is located here at the base of the right angle. And then one is also located on the far side of the right angle. And if you hit any of those 3 stops while this machine is hooked up with the right angle, they will stop the machine from moving. If the machine is only in straight mode with just this parent portion here and the right angle is divorced from the machine itself, then only the safety stop on the main control panel is the one that's going to stop the machine. This is the main power switch, and it is equipped with a loop for lockout tagout if the machine is being worked on. But I don't recommend anyone that works in this department ever repair this piece of equipment. If you have issues with it, call a company here local, would be Santa Fe Sales and Service or Steyer's Equipment. Either of those have technicians who are familiar with and can repair this machine and offer parts as well. In my opinion, the most dangerous part of this piece of equipment is going to be the moving parts. There's not necessarily an electrical shock hazard, there's not a chemical hazard. It's purely a spinning parts and getting yourself hung up in this machine. But how this machine operates is it has spinning rollers. One personal safety device I'd like you to really consider is going to be wearing some hearing protection when you get this machine up and running, because it is quite noisy. I've spent many years working in the print industry not wearing hearing protection, and as a consequence of that, I have significant hearing loss in my left ear. And I would hate to have any of you experience hearing loss just from being subjected to loud noises day in and day out. So there's hearing protection provided for your ear. I strongly suggest you use it because it doesn't cost you anything, but it can save your hearing. This manual is typically sitting on a work table behind the machine with some other manuals to show you how to run the batch counter, which was an option on this machine. The main control panel has several buttons and switches on it, which I'll kind of briefly go over what each of them do. All of these instructions can also be found in the operator's manual, as I mentioned before. We're going to start with, first here is the main power switch on and off. This is the switch that turns the air, blow, and vacuum pump on and off, which the main power is off, so I'm not going to make the noise, but they're coming on, but it's simply an on-off switch. As I've mentioned before, this is the safety stop, which you press to make all the mechanical motions stop on the machine, and it is a twist lock, so you have to turn it slightly to the right, and it'll pop back out, and that'll allow you to start the machine back up again. These buttons down here are for the drive motor. This is the start button to make the drive motor start, make all the parts spin. This is just the kind of casual stop the drive motor, not an emergency stop per se, but just something to make it stop. This switch here relates to the feed table, and it is in the neutral position right now. To move the table up, you turn it to the right. If you need to move the table down to load it with paper, you would turn it to the left. While it is in the right position or the up mode, what it is looking for is a little micro switch on the back end of the stack that is looking for the top of the paper stack. And as the paper raises up, it trips that little micro switch, and that allows it to maintain a specific height for feeding. So you're looking for a consistent height between the top of the paper stack and the feed wheel for it to consistently use the vacuum to progress the sheet on into the machine. These buttons over here, actually this is just an indicator light, but this is the stop the feed motion and stop the feed motion. So when the machine is running, which you'll see later, that when the machine is running, the vacuum is on and everything's set up. You press the button, it'll activate the feed wheel. These two settings here alter the characteristics of the vacuum as it is applied to the vacuum wheel. This first setting here alters the space between the first sheet as it goes in and the preceding sheets after that. So it is the time between the first pulse start and the start of the second pulse and the start of the third pulse of vacuum. The second setting over here is the length of time each pulse of vacuum lasts as it pulls the sheet into the machine. For a quick, easy reference or a starting point for setting these up, there is a little cheat sheet chart down here to help you get some basis numbers to get yourself started, but they can always be altered to make the machine run a little bit better for your application later. All right, so what we're going to do is a baseline setting of the pressures between the pinch rollers. And we're going to set it to a single sheet of, I don't know what this is, maybe 80-pound gloss cover. It might be a 100-pound gloss cover. It doesn't really matter, but we're going to put a single sheet underneath each of the calipers. And then we're going to set the rollers to that single sheet thickness. So you push back on these wire hoops, stick your paper in there, and like that. Use the hand wheel, and we're going to turn the machine back and forth. We're going to start with setting number 1. And you can look at this chart, and it shows you where each of the corresponding settings, what rollers it will affect as it goes through the machine. But I'll explain it verbally as we do it. So setting number 1 is the 2 rollers that pulls the sheet into the folding mechanism. So you want to use the hand wheel and pull the same sheet of paper stock that you have underneath your calipers and set it to where you can just pull it out. The amount of tension is not nearly as critical as that it is even. That wasn't bad. We were able to pull it out without ripping the sheet off. So it's all good. So now we're going to go to setting number 2, which would be the pinch point between after it leaves gate number 1 and it goes down into these 2 pinch rollers. And that is awfully loose. So I'm going to tighten that up just a little bit. And one direction makes it loose, and the other direction makes it tight, and I never remember which direction is which because I just turn it one way and you'll know it's right or wrong. That ain't bad. Close is good enough. So now we're setting number 3, and this would be as it turns and it points the sheet into the lower gate labeled number 2. And this machine is surprisingly appearing to be in pretty good shape. It's always a good idea to do this at the very start when you're setting anything up, because it could avoid problems later, and it's something you know walking into it. I know the rollers are set appropriately, so if it's going to give you a problem with dog ears or bad folding or whatever, you've already eliminated one of the major problems.
Some people, it's their job to run one of these every day, and you come in at the first of your shift, this is the first thing you do. So you know the rest of the day, you're set. So basically, you're just going back through, you're setting the pressures, every one to the single thickness of paper, which corresponds with what we have underneath the calipers. That one's awfully loose. And that is 1, 2, 3, 4.
So if you changed thickness of paper, like to 70 pound, would you need to redo this whole process?
No.
Okay. We're just kind of calibrating.
This is a baseline setting.
Got it.
So if we're gonna fold 70 pound, then we're gonna put 70 pound underneath here. And if it needs a double thickness under, we'll say setting number 3, then we fold it over and have a double thickness that we put under 3. Right now we're just setting a baseline setting.
Got it.
And you just kind of go through every single one of these, and then this is number 5, and it is crazy loose. On that side, see, that's way uneven. And then finally, we're setting the tension in the output wheels. And that's how you set it. Okay, we're gonna set up a fold that's using the machine in straight mode. We're gonna take an 11 by 17 and simply just fold it in half. Pretty easy. We're gonna start off, we're gonna look at our handy dandy little cheat sheet here, and we're gonna want to do a number 1 fold. And number 1 fold, if I can get all these guides out of our way. A number 1 fold says the thicknesses that we need for each of these corresponding calipers that we set up in the earlier video. So under the number 1, we want 1 thickness, and everyone else we want 2 thicknesses. I have already pre-cut some 1-inch wide strips, and I'm going to stagger them to where it hangs out a little bit. So as I put it underneath here, number 1 has 1 and everyone else has 2 thicknesses. And we're going to do the same on the opposing side. You could tear a bunch of little bitty sheets and just do it that way, but I'm lazy. So there we go. That gives us 1 thickness under caliper number 1 and 2 thicknesses under caliper 3, 5, 2, 4, and in the output rollers. Those look like a little perf because on the output rollers you can use a perf wheel or you can use a score wheel. That's why it looks like that. Now we're going to set up our gates. And since it's a single fold, and I try to take a sheet and just kind of visualize what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to go into the machine, I'm going to fold it like that. I only need 1 gate. And I've got gates number 1 and 3 locked in the up position. It has a little deflector at the bottom of every gate. So if you want to bypass a gate, put that in the lower mode, lower the gate, and the paper will travel around and bypass this gate. The same with every other gate, even gate number 1. You can put paper through here and not fold it. That's what you want to do. To raise and lower gates, they have a locking handle. And what you do is you turn the little handle and that releases the clamp and allows you to lower the gate. Or if you want to lock it in the up position, you raise it and press the lock on it. Like I said before, we have a little deflector. We're only using gate number 1, so we want this to be open. Raise that up and lower the gate and lock it in place. Okay, so now we're going to set up the feeder. One thing to kind of keep in mind, the way this machine is made is it feeds out of the center with the vacuum feed wheel. So the sheet of paper that we're folding is an 11 by 17, 11 inches wide. It has a handy dandy little scale over here on the side, which is kind of confusing because if we try to put this out at 11, we're like, oh my gosh, we're all the way off the edge. But actually they want you to think about half of the sheet, not the whole sheet. So we want to move this guide to 5.5 here, and then you adjust the feed table with this knob. This is to the left is down, the middle is neutral, and to the right is up, obviously from the graphic. Then we want to set the tail end of our feeder, which holds the back end of the machine and also has, as I previously described, a little micro switch under here that looks at the top of the pile of paper and keeps it at a consistent level with the feed wheel, like so. So we're going to set the back end of the feeder up with these little pins drop in just behind the sheet. Then from here, we have options. Lovely to have options in life. We've got lots of little accessories that we can use, that we can spin off of here and remove it. So for an operator side guide for this paper, we can simply use this additional pin, which is great. It'll work just fine. If you don't care for this little guide, it's up to you, personal preference. We can just spin that out of the way and we can use a little bit wider one. Tuck them in here like that and move them over to where you need it. And you lock it in place. And this guide here is adjustable by height by turning the knob, and you can raise it up and keep it out of the way. This guide, in my opinion, is great for a big tall stack, but for a little bitty half-inch stack of paper like we got here, maybe 3/8, don't care as much for it. Like I said, personal preference. So I'm gonna put him over here on this accessory storage rail. I'm gonna slide this one back over. I'm showing biased here, huh? And I'm gonna raise the pile back up, and the sheet is defined in place, locked in place, height adjusted, we're all good. Yeah. So now it's probably time to set the double sheet detector. And we've got the same paper stock that we have in the feeder. We want this machine to feed one thickness of paper, not two. We only want one at a time. And if it tries to feed two, we want it to stop. So we're have the power, main power is on. We're gonna turn the feed rollers on. I've got my paper folded over to where it has one thickness, and then after a point it goes to two. And you can see this little cam will stop when it should stop when we get to the thickness of 2, right there. And what that will do is stop the feeding action and allow you to clear the double sheet, make an adjustment to your feeder where it only feeds one at a time. Okay, so after you've set the double sheet detector where it will only accept one sheet at a time, now you need to set it to tell it what the thickness of one sheet is. And I fold this over so it doesn't fall out on the floor when you press on this lever here to open it up. And you put the one thickness in there. The reason that I folded it is because when it does detect a double sheet and it stops the feeding, you have to press down on this lever to clear it. And my little fold is keeping my little piece of paper in there. There's your $1 million tip. Okay, now for setting up the feeding action, we're gonna go to our handy dandy secondary little cheat chart. And these numbers here reference the length of the paper as it is fed through the machine. So we are talking about an 11 by 17 sheet, but the 17 is a feeded direction, and the number 17 is between 16 and 18. So we want numbers between 45 and 50 and 24 and 25. And those correspond with these numbers up here. So we're going to say the space between 45 and 50, we're going to go 47. 47. Then 17, 24, 25, we're just going to go 24. 24. And that's a starting point, really. You can adjust these for your needs as you move down the road. You find that it is folding great, and I could use less space between each of the sheets as they're fed into the machine, and it runs just fine, and that just makes it run faster because you're feeding less gap and more paper and making more product. You might also find that maybe the paper is a little curly or something. You want to put a little bit more vacuum over the length of the sheet, and that's what that secondary number is. So that's our starting point, 47 and 24. Okay, so now we're going to set up the feeder bed. I don't know what I call it. I call it the feeder bed. You call it whatever you want. It has a scale very much like the feed table that has a ruler on it, and we're feeding an 11-inch sheet. But we have to divide the number in half, so we're going to go to 5.5 over here, roughly, and we're going to lock it down. Then you set up the far side of this other guide. You want to set it up to where the guide just goes to the edge of the sheet and a little bit beyond. And with this one here, a little bit wide is fine. A little bit too tight ain't gonna work. So a little bit wide. Okay, so now we're gonna turn the machine on and try to feed the first sheet through and see how it folds. It's gonna turn the power on. Then we're gonna turn the vacuum/air pump on. It's gonna get noisy. And one thing we want to look at is the lead edge of the feed pile. That is adjustable with this little knob. You can loosen up a lock screw, and we can raise this air bar up to where we're only fluttering the top couple of feet. And that's where you want to start. Then, making sure our fingers get clear, we're going to turn the drive motor on. Then this is the feed button to make it feed paper, but it is not a momentary button. You press it once and it's going to stay in feed mode until we press it again. We only want to feed one sheet of paper, so I'm going to press it twice really fast. You come to the back side of the machine and you see that our paper has disappeared. It has fallen on the floor. Why? Did our paper fall on the floor? Because our output rollers were too far out and it just merely bounced and fell off the roller. So we set up this feed table where these rollers are centered to where the sheet's coming out, and they're far enough away to where an 8.5 by 11 is going to be able to land on this belt. I'm going to press this feed button with the exact same thing as the one that's on the main console. I'm going to press it twice. There you go. So we have a sheet of paper that has been folded in half. But boy, I sure would like that to be folded evenly. Sides or interfaces with this edge of that part of the gate, and we're going to move it, and we want this fold to be 5.5. We're going to loosen it. It's got little lock screws on the side, sure makes it easier to turn. So we're going to move it down to closer to 5.5, about like that, and we're going to lock these screws into place. Now we're going to feed one more. 5.5 wasn't what I wanted, because half of 17 is 8.5. So we're going to loosen up the lock screws, and we're going to move this to 8.5. Learn from our mistakes. Lock them back in place. Turn everything back on. Feed one more sheet. And boy, that is a lot closer to 8.5, but it could come up a little more because it's feeding into the machine this direction. This edge is being stopped by the edge of the gate here. So if we move that edge of the gate up just a little bit, it's going to be better. Pretty good. Now, another part of the setup is finishing up the setup of our delivery table. Because obviously, these sheets don't fit here very well. So you can just pull this out and give yourself a little bit of working room to capture these. As they fall on the delivery tray. If you want the belt to speed faster, that's what this little dial is for. It speeds up the belt on the delivery. And from here, we'll say stop. Let's turn that back to a reasonable speed. And we'll cut the air. One other option with the settings on the gates, not only can you change the distance of the stop plate on the gate, is you can also adjust the angle of that stop plate. And you loosen up the plastic little screw, and you can see the little notches when they're lined up. That means it's at a perfect right angle with the rest of the machine. But let's say you want your fold to maybe be skewed. You want your fold to be skewed one direction or the other, or it's not perfectly straight. And is this one perfectly straight? Well, sadly, but let's say it needs to be this way a little bit more. So you just turn that portion of the gate, lock it back down, and that will force the fold to be crooked or be straight, right? But we want it to be straight. You have as an option these little plates that you can put in back here in the feeder to kind of hold the sheet down, because sometimes with the lighter weight stock, the air's blowing on it trying to fan them together, and it gets a little crazy back here. Well, you can take this one, for instance, and you can slide them on the rail this direction and then lock them down. And that's just kind of hold the paper down and give it a little bit more control. It is adjustable itself with an Allen set. So if you want this plate to be a little higher, a little lower, you can do that. I think optimally you want it to be about the height of the bottom of the feeder wheel. But that'll give us just a little bit more control. And you can put one on either side if you wish. If you need lots of control in your life, you can go crazy with it. Okay, so one thing that we should probably cover as well is we did a base setup of these numbers on the settings, between the distance between the sheets and the amount of area that the vacuum wheel affects the sheet as it's being fed in. And I want to kind of show you what happens when you change those numbers, and you can completely do this on the fly. So we're going to go ahead, we already have the main power on, we're going to turn the air on, start the motor, and we're going to start the feeder. And notice the distance between the sheets as they go down the We're going to change this number here, and we're going to make it much larger. And you're going to notice the gap between the sheets significantly increases.
If you wanted to increase, well, we're going to go crazy with it. We're going to increase the amount of duration of vacuum on the sheet to something crazy. It's probably not going to be happy, but here we go. Before you start to remove the delivery from the base machine, come around to the back side, 2 connections here. This first connection has a little bail on it that you have to push up and remove the little catch here and pull him out of the way. The second round plug is locked in by the cap on the back side. So you push back with your index finger and grasp the plug and wiggle it, and it will come out. Then you take these cords and then you wrap them around the base of the delivery. The first step of setting up the right angle is to pull this delivery off the back end of the base machine. What you do after you've unplugged it from the back of the machine, then you have yourself a cart close by, because this thing can be a little bit heavy for some people. It has 2 grab handles on either side, and you lift up on the back end and angle it slightly and pull it up and out. Move it to the cart and set it down. Now that you have your delivery on the cart moved out of the way, it's time to slide the right angle in. And you're looking to position it roughly about this. We'll do some fine tuning here in a little bit. After pushing the right angle in place, you kind of do the opposite with the cords that are mounted to the right angle. First, I always start with the round plug, and I push the door out of the way with my index finger, making sure that the little tab here is indexed with the little notch on the plug receptacle. Then push up and lock it in place. Then the second you push this bail out of the way, then line up the pins, then you latch this bail down and it locks the connection in place. Now I have the delivery on the cart kind of positioned close to the back end of the right angle, and we're going to lift it up and latch it into place on the back of the right angle. And it's the exact opposite procedure as removing it from the base of the machine. Kind of lift up on the back end, lower it down, and you let it fall into place and latch it in. And then finally, the electrical connections for the delivery have to plug in to the underside of the right angle. Again, we're looking for the little tab and notch on the round plug, and it plugs in here. And the bottom plug plugs in just like it would on the back of the base machine with the little bail, and you push it into place and then you lock it down. The score wheels are set to where they will score the sheet after the first fold, so they will put a score into the sheet so it will then fold down to a size to fit into a number 10 envelope. It may not be necessary to do this, but it does help make for a nice crisp fold at the end product. So now we're ready to make some final adjustments and fold a couple of sheets, maybe 20 or 30, to make sure the setup is going to give us everything that we want.